Hello, everyone. Ron here from L.T.L. Tutoring Central, and I am back with another reading comprehension discussion video. You could call it a reading listening comprehension discussion video. You can use it in many different ways. The title of this one is Hemingway's Advice on Writing, Ambition, and the Art of Revision. Sounds very interesting. Hemingway, a famous American author, of course. He's well known for writing in a fairly concise way, not uh, I don't want to say wasting, but not elaborating enormously. He cuts his text down considerably. Some very, very good stories I've read from Hemingway. So interested to get into this one. Before we do, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed and liked videos, shared videos, etc. Keep your comments coming in. This is a discussion, so you can join in the discussion on YouTube. And of course, you can always get a hold of me through email as well. There will be links below, also to my books and short stories. And there's playlists as well. There's playlists for the reading comprehension discussion. There's playlists for the story reading. There's playlists for collocations and idioms, so you can check all of those out as well. And don't forget to like the video. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we will get into the article that we're looking at. It's a fairly long article. I am just checking to make sure I have my mute here in case I have to mute if I start coughing. Right, because I do these in one take. So this is pocket-worthy stories to fuel your mind. Hemingway's advice on writing, ambition, and the art of revision. In any art, you're allowed to steal anything if you can make it better. This is originally from the Marginalian. Maria Popova, I hope I'm saying that right, is the author. I will put a link in the description below to this article. I'm just reading it directly from their site to try to avoid any copyright issues. And so we're sort of promoting them as well. All right, there we go. Hemingway left and Samuelson fishing and talking in Key West. You can't really see Hemingway too well there, but there he is. As a writer, you should not judge, you should understand. Ernest Hemingway, July 21, 1899, July 2nd, 1961 was when he died, counseled in his 1935 Esquire Compendium of Writing Advice, addressed to an archetypal young correspondent, but based on a real-life encounter that had taken place a year earlier. In 1934, a 22-year-old aspiring writer named Arnold Samuelson, so that was the man in the picture above, set out to meet his literary hero, hoping to steal a few moments with Hemingway to talk about writing. The son of Norwegian immigrant wheat farmers, he had just completed his coursework in journalism at the University of Minnesota, but had refused to pay the $5 diploma fee. And there's a book cover, I guess, with Hemingway, A Year in Key West in Cuba, Arnold Samuelson. So he refused to pay the $5 diploma fee, convinced that his literary education would be best served by apprenticing himself to Hemingway. However briefly, he hitchhiked atop a coal car from Minnesota to Key West. It seemed a damn fool thing to do, Samuelson later recalled, but a 22-year-old tramp during the Great Depression didn't have to have much reason for what he did. Unreasonable though the quest may have been, he ended up staying with Hemingway for almost an entire year, over the course of which he became the literary titan's only true protege. Samuelson recorded the experience and its multitude of learnings in a manuscript that was only discovered by his daughter after his death in 1981. It was eventually published as With Hemingway, A Year in Key West and Cuba, Public Library, the closest thing to a psychological profile of the great writer. Shortly after the young man's arrival in Key West, Hemingway got right down to granting him what he had traveled there seeking. In one of their first exchanges, he hands Samuelson a handwritten list and instructs him. Here's a list of books any writer should have read as part of his education. If you haven't read these, you just aren't educated. They represent different types of writing. Some may bore you, others might inspire you, and others are so beautifully written, they'll make you feel it's hopeless for you to try to write. All right, so I'm going to make a few comments as I read through. I should have mentioned at the beginning, I'm I when I saw the title of this, I thought this is very interesting because I'm always trying to learn from other writers as well, especially ones that are well known and published, and and so it's good for me for my own writing to learn from them. Sometimes to learn what not to do. It's not that they always have good advice. Some of them have poor advice. And yes, even some of the very famous writers, they can bore you. Not all of their writing interests everybody. And sometimes you read something that is so beautifully written, you just want to give up writing altogether. I've done that many times. I've destroyed probably more of my stories than I'll ever publish because you just get frustrated and think, okay, my writing is not good enough. But you really shouldn't do that. This is the list of heartening and hopeless making masterworks that Hemingway handed to young Samuelson. And there's a handwritten note here, but I think I saw that there was typed underneath. Yes, so I will read that. It'll probably be easier for me to read. But you can see that this is a handwritten note signed by Ernest Hemingway. The Blue Hotel by Stephen Crane. I have not read that. The Open Boat by Stephen Crane. Haven't read that either. I don't think I've ever read Stephen Crane. I don't recognize the name. Madame Bovary, Gustave Flaubert. I may have read that. I certainly know the name. Dubliners, James Joyce. Yes. The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Of Human Bondage, W. Somerset Maugham. Anna Karenina, I always say that wrong. Leo Tolstoy, Russian author. War and Peace, Tolstoy again. Uh, Buddenbrooks, Thomas Mann. I have read Thomas Mann. I'm not sure I've read that one. Hail and Farewell, George Moore. Read some of Moore too. The Brothers Karamazov, Fyodor Dostoevsky. The Oxford Book of English Verse. Interesting one. The Enormous Room, E. E. Cummings. Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte. Far Away and Long Ago, W. H. Hudson. The American, Henry James. So that's his list. Not on the handwritten list, but offered in the conversation surrounding the exchange is what Hemingway considered the best book an American ever wrote, the one that marks the beginning of American literature, Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which I have read that one, of course. And of course, this leans American, although there's some Russians in this list up above as well and others, but Hemingway being American himself. So this picture or art is by Norman Rockwell for a rare edition of Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Alongside these edifying essentials, Hemingway offered young Samuelson some concrete writing advice. Advocating for staying with what psychologists now call flow, he begins with the psychological discipline of the writing process. The most important thing I've learned about writing is never write too much at a time. Never pump yourself dry. Leave a little for the next day. The main thing is to know when to stop. Don't wait till you've written yourself out. When you're still going good and you come to an interesting place and you know what's going to happen next, that's the time to stop. Then leave it alone and don't think about it. Let your subconscious mind do the work. Now, this I think is excellent advice. I try to do that. I don't always succeed. But I will make one note here. When you do that and you're stopping at that interesting place and you know what's going to happen next, you should probably stop, but you should also make a little note on the side to remind you of where you're going next, because I have done this. And then, of course, work and other things take over, and I don't get back to my story for some period of time. And sometimes it's a long period of time. And when I get back, I see what I've written. I really like it. And it stops. And I think, but where was I going next? I don't remember. So it's good to make a note of that. If you're going to be away from your writing, if you're writing every day, it's not a problem. But if you have other work, other jobs and things, and you want to come back. But it is good to let your subconscious mind do some of the work. And I think that's the same with your studies and that as well. Don't keep going and going, especially once you start feeling tired and burned out. You need to stop, rest, get a night's sleep maybe, or a nap, and let your brain mull this over. Even if you think you're not thinking about it, it does make a big difference. You often wake up and think, oh, now I understand that math equation. Oh, now I get this. Or I see the connection, or I can network this with something else. Then, echoing Lewis Carroll's advice on overcoming creative block in problem solving, Hemingway considers the practical tactics of this psychological strategy. The next morning, when you've had a good sleep and you're feeling fresh, rewrite what you wrote the day before. When you come to the interesting place and you know what is going to happen next, go on from there and stop at another high point of interest. That way, when you get through, your stuff is full of interesting places. And when you write a novel, you never get stuck and you make it interesting as you go along. Every day, go back to the beginning and rewrite the whole thing. And when it gets too long, read at least 2 or 3 chapters before you start to write. And at least once a week, go back to the start. That way, you make it one piece. And when you go over it, cut out everything you can. The main thing is to know what to leave out. The way you tell whether you're going good is by what you can throw away. If you can throw away stuff that would make a high point of interest in somebody else's story, you know you're going good. All right. Um, yes, good advice. I think generally, I don't usually go back and rewrite, but I do reread what I have written so that I sort of remind myself and catch myself up. Sometimes I do that even while I'm writing. I'll still go back and just so that I can get the flow. And this, the part here, if you can throw away stuff or saying, and when you go over it, cut out everything you can. That's Hemingway's style, is to, like I say, keep it concise, get rid of any extraneous bits that are not really needed. And at the end here, he's saying, if you can throw away stuff that, so in other words, if you can throw away pieces that someone else, some other writer would probably, you know, really want in their story, then you know you're doing exceptionally well because you've hit not only the high point, but the highest high points, and you're keeping only the very best for your story. He then returns to the psychological payoff of this trying practice. Don't get discouraged because there's a lot of mechanical work to writing. There is, and you can't get out of it. I rewrote A Farewell to Arms at least 50 times. And that's a very famous novel. It used to be taught in high school. I'm not sure. I don't think it is. I haven't had any of my students in the last 28 years read A Farewell to Arms, but it used to be. You've got to work it over. The first draft of anything is shit. When you first start to write, you get all the kick and the reader gets none. But after you learn to work, it's your object to convey everything to the reader so that he remembers it not as a story he had read, but something that happened to himself. So, yeah, the reader gets right into the story. That's the true test of writing. When you can do that, the reader gets the kick and you don't get any. You just get hard work, and the better you write, the harder it is because every story has to be better than the last one. It's the hardest work there is. I like to do and can do many things better than I can write. But when I don't write, I feel like shit. I've got the talent and I feel that I'm wasting it. Now, that's true. Sometimes when you're not able to get to your writing for one reason or another, uh, you start to feel down. You start to feel bad. Um, that's the true test of writing. So it, sometimes you get excited about something and you write it down and this is really good, this is really good. But he's saying you have to work it, you have to rework it, and you have to think about the reader. I mean, it's the reader that you're trying to please, not just yourself. When Samuelson asks how one can know whether one has any talent, Hemingway writes, or replies rather, you can't. Sometimes you can go on writing for years before it shows. If a man's got it in him, it will come out sometime. The only thing I can advise you is to keep on writing, but it's a damn tough racket. The only reason I make any money at it is I'm a sort of literary pirate. Out of every 10 stories I write, only one is any good, and I throw the other 9 away. I'm questioning here whether we are our own best judges, however. Maybe if I could sneak a peek at those other 9 he threw away, there might be one or two at least, maybe more, in there that I would say, oh, I think this is a good one, maybe even better than the one you kept. So I don't know if we can judge ourselves. Sometimes we can, but I throw a lot away. Hemingway tempers this with a word of advice on ambition, self-comparison, and originality. Never compete with living writers. You don't know whether they're good or not. Compete with the dead ones you know are good. Then, when you can pass them up, you know you're going good. You should have read all the good stuff so that you know what has been done, because if you have a story like one somebody else has written, yours isn't any good unless you can write a better one. In any art, you're allowed to steal anything if you can make it better, but the tendency should always be upward instead of down. And don't ever imitate anybody. All style is the awkwardness of a writer in stating a fact. If you have a way of your own, you are fortunate. But if you try to write like somebody else, you'll have the awkwardness of the other writer as well as your own. Okay, so there's some good advice there. And I think when he says, you're allowed to steal anything if you can make it better. I think it's just the ideas. Obviously, you don't plagiarize and just copy somebody else's writing, because he's also saying don't imitate someone else. You'll just gain their awkwardness in addition to your own. Hemingway shows off a 324-pound, wow, blue marlin as Samuelson, far left, admires it. That's a big, big one. In a sentiment that calls to mind Neil Gaiman's magnificent commencement address on the only adequate response to criticism, Hemingway cautions Samuelson about the petty jealousies that arise with success. When you start to write, everybody is wishing you luck, but when you're going good, they try to kill you. The only way you can ever stay on top is by writing good stuff. And I've noticed here, and you will have noticed, I'm sure by now, the adjective good is used over and over and over and over by Hemingway. So yeah, he's plain speaking here, nothing fancy. Uh, yes, that's right. Sometimes when an author or anyone's an actor or whatever a singer starts to be successful, at first everybody's rooting them on. And then when they get success, all of a sudden not everybody. They still have lots of fans, but there's a lot of people out criticizing them, trying to cut them down, trying to disparage them. I'm not sure why people do that, but it's true. With Hemingway, a year in Key West and Cuba brims with the celebrated writer's wisdom on literature, life, and the creative experience. Complement it with Hemingway on knowledge and the dangers of ego and his short, spectacular Nobel Prize acceptance speech. Then revisit the essential reading lists of John Didion, Leo Tolstoy, Susan Sontag, Alan Turing, Brian Eno, David Byrne, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Patti Smith. Okay, so that is the end of this article. I will put a link, as I say, down below so that you can go and have a look at this yourself directly on the site and see all the other things that they have too. I've made this large, so there's lots of ads and things on the sides that you're not seeing here in case you're interested, and links to other things that you might be interested as well. So uh, Hemingway's advice on writing ambition in the art of revision. I thought that was excellent. I thought there were some really good pointers there. I'm going to stop share for a minute. Here we go. Yeah, some excellent pointers there for writers, but for other people too, to not give up, to keep trying, to keep working, to keep and not get discouraged just because someone else is doing better than you. I do have students, uh, generally younger students, but even adult students who, they're in a classroom and somebody else seems to be getting things done quicker than them, or they're always getting an A and I can't get anything better than a C or a B or whatever. And it's like, don't keep paying attention to those people. Pay attention to the work, pay attention to the effort, and you will get there in your own time, in your own way. And sometimes the grades don't tell us the whole story anyway. But the idea is to focus on improving yourself. Did you do better than the last time that you tried? Are you following the right strategies, etc.? And if you are writing, if you're a writer or an aspiring writer at least, you don't need to keep comparing yourself to living or dead authors. I mean, it's a good idea to read a lot and to see what other authors do, and maybe they have some sort of techniques and ideas that you can borrow from, not plagiarize, not copy, but you get an idea of how to do it. We learn how to do almost anything by watching other people, obviously. We don't just do it on our own. We learn to do from uh, guidance and following other people. So it's good to read a lot and extract some technique and ideas from other writers. But don't allow that to discourage you because they just seem so good and yours doesn't at the moment. But remember, if you saw their rough drafts, maybe they were terrible as well. That's the other thing. Often people write something and they expect it to be, really good, and you know, right after the first draft. And they may have only spent a few hours on it, or they might have spent a week on it, but it's still the first draft. You didn't revise it, you didn't edit it, you didn't rewrite it. Like Hemingway said, he wrote that story, what, 50 times. So what you're seeing from a professional author may have been written 20, 30, 40, 50 times before you see it. You didn't see all the other ones. So they could be very much weaker than your first draft. Who knows? Anyway, enough rambling from me. Let me know what you think of the article. Are you a writer? What about your studies? Do you do that? Do you sometimes tend to get down on yourself? Um, are you working on that? Are you trying to improve that situation? So you can let me know here on YouTube. You can email me, of course. All the information will be in the description, as well as a link to the original article, as I say. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you did, give it a thumbs up. Uh, what else am I forgetting? Also, click on notifications can help. The only other thing I'm forgetting is to say, keep learning, keep having fun. It is Ron from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Until next time, bye-bye for now.